To our webinar discussion series on illicit tobacco trade. Today, we will discuss the detection and prevention methods, and our aim of this discussion will be to increase the understanding of the main detection and prevention methods that are in place for fighting the illicit tobacco trade. And we will look at, firstly, we will look at one of the key documents that we do not only use in the region, but within the EU, is the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products, so World Health Organization protocol. What are its main objectives regarding the trade, detection and prevention methods. Then we will go into specific section of this protocol, and this is the methods for risk assessment and the control areas. And at the end, we will also, as we usually do in our webinar discussion series, we will look at also some regional examples and also best practices that we could possibly learn from. And also I would like to once again, I'm so used to, because you know I'm every day with Milena and Livia and Ludo. I almost forgot to introduce our panelists. So again, we are lucky to have with us Milena Milojevic, who is an internal auditor at the Serbian agency that deals with EU funds cross-border. We have a very experienced prosecutor, Livia Panjic-Miletić, from Subotica, only 25 years prosecutor, a very passionate prosecutor. And we have also former police officer, Dutch police officer Ludo Blok, who was all but Dutch stationed, predominantly in abroad, and if I may say, Russia, Ludo, am I correct? Yes.
Yeah, correct.
Yes, so, and the last 10 years, Ludo has been very active in investigations in the private sector. So guys, very warm welcome to three of you. I'm very happy that we are together again, and that we can discuss another important and interesting topic.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just give a brief before we dive into some questions, to give a brief background on the protocol. So the protocol was actually adopted in consensus only in 2012, but it took some time before it started with implementation. Yeah? And not all countries are at the same level of implementing this protocol. Some of them struggle actually to ratification also process, but there are some also good examples that already enjoy the positive effects of securing supply chain and also different prevention mechanisms. We know that illicit tobacco trade is a huge problem. We have been discussing this also in another webinar discussions. It really, if I just focus now not just on the extent and the size of the numbers of cigarettes, the tobacco that is being smuggled, but let's start from the other side. Let's just say that on the health side, it really threatens the health of the population. And this illicit trade in tobacco actually causes as many as 6 million deaths annually. So we're not only talking now, you know, of I don't know, 10 million packs being smuggled via Maghreb route, or 29 million via extended Balkan route, but actually illicit tobacco trade is causing around 6 million deaths annually. It's a huge number. And it's also fostering criminality and, of course, reducing the tax revenues. The protocol is, and I think we can all three of us agree, it's exceptionally important. And among two key aspects of tobacco, of protocol, is actually the quality control and supply chain supervision. So let's now go into some of the questions just to start, because maybe not all of our listeners are acquainted with the protocol, or they're just now starting to deal with these issues. So how is the protocol developed? I mean, what was the basis? How it came to being developed, and what is the heart of the protocol? Is it the effective barriers to limit the illicit trade, or to secure the supply chain of tobacco products?
Well, I will start as usual, may I say. So basically the protocol is the international treaty, and the idea of the protocol is to eliminating all forms of illicit tobacco products with the packages of measures, and in the cooperation of all countries, which they called parties in the protocol, through the cooperation. The illicit trade tobacco is a serious problem, as you said, Sandra. The numbers that you were saying about that are dreadful. So it's a global problem, and it has to be a global resolving, because the smoking is something that we really can find, and the problems with illicit tobacco all around the world. Because this is such a huge problem, the idea was, depending on the Article 15, to find a way to specialize that combat against illicit trade tobacco. That's why the protocol is basically made, and the idea is to work on the measures which will prevent. So the prevention is the idea of the protocol. Protocol is structured in the three parts. First is preventing illicit trade, so the measures of how to preventing. The second part of the protocol is the law enforcement, and the third is the international cooperation. So in those three parts, we can see what is the idea of the protocol, and what I like is that protocol is aiming not just the tobacco and the tobacco products, but the manufacturing equipment. So it is also very important in the whole industry of tobacco, and of course, very important when we speak about the illicit trade in tobacco. What I don't like, I have to say, Sandra, in this protocol is the first word, to eliminating all forms. To eliminate all forms, I don't think it is possible. I think in previous discussions, we agreed all that we are optimistic, but we have to be realistic too. I think it's the good start, but somehow, that word eliminating all is something that a little bit bothers me.
Ludo, Milena, you have something to add, or we can, maybe if we discuss, I mean, you did mention, the main objective of protocol, being on prevention side, but at the same, and that it also deals not with the, as you said, not liking the word eliminating all, but it deals also with the manufacturing. Is this connected what they're talking about, the prevention point, when you actually making the supply chain secure? How this will be achieved? Okay, so what are the steps that they're envisioning in protocol in order to achieve its effectiveness in practice? How do they make this supply chain secure of tobacco products?
Shall I start again?
No,
Yeah,
we will.
Okay, so there are some measures that the protocol is trying to adopt not just on international but on the national levels too. So the idea is to establish a tracking and tracing system, but inside of the supply chain. Then there are some licensing, very important. Then we have the record keeping, which is also very important on the national level, and then sharing those information through the all members of the protocol. Then they speak about things that we didn't speak at all on our sessions, which are regulation of internet sales, very, I think, important, and duty-free sales and international transits. I would here stop at the point regulation of internet sales, very important. We just briefly touched the problem of the digital currencies, and the internet is a big world, and how we can save our data, how we can control the trades in internet. In the past, it was hard, but not so hard because we had the classical paper. Okay, so we looked through the papers, we had some documents, and we did our research on that. Now we had some, it is easier maybe to do that on internet, but then it's easier to hide some things through the same internet. So I think it's also the things that make a job very hard.
That's a good point, because we really didn't talk, and there's not much really on let's say the measures that I was able to read actually on how to prevent sales on the internet. Do you have any experience recently? Were you able to prevent in your daily work? I mean, in your work?
No. About this topic, no. But this is a rising problem, and as we said, we have to act proactively. I think we have to be prepared for these things will happen. So I never had it in my experience, in my work. I'm not saying that it doesn't happening, but I didn't have the chance to work on those cases.
I'm wondering to which extent actually internet sales is already a relevant proportion of the illicit tobacco trade. In my experience, it's still much more, especially if you look at the distribution of illicit tobacco, you see that bars, cafes, informal networks play a large role. People buy their illicit cigarettes from, well, the people they know, from their network. I haven't come across internet sales as a real problem yet on the enforcement side, but maybe that's something that is more in the future, and then the protocol is looking ahead. That could be possible.
Yes,
well,
I think
I'm expecting definitely that this will be on the rise. Especially if you look at also what was the effect of these COVID times. It's actually, we moved all the business and everything, we moved online. So maybe it's just not evident as much. Maybe these are things that are happening on deep web, dark web. I don't know.
Exactly,
well,
Sandra. Exactly. I'm sorry, Ludo. I think that's the problem. We don't know it. We don't. That's my afraid as a prosecutor that it is happening, and we are not aware of that, as many other illegal activities are happening in through the deep web.
Yes and no. If you I do regular investigations, also including information from the dark web. And what you see, I think we have to make a difference between, is the dark web and the internet being used for large group of criminals to connect with each other, or and then trade illicit tobacco, or are they is it used as a distribution system to the end consumer? And as a distribution system to the end consumer, that's absolutely not visible yet. There are these dark markets. Yes, you can buy all kind of illicit goods, but cigarettes, I haven't come across them yet.
I only think that this is the, I mean, my gut feeling tells me that it's actually the dark web is being used predominantly to connect and maybe to make deals, sales, but at the end, you know, the distribution needs to be physical.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah, and also from an economic perspective, if you look at the additional cost, let's say you buy your cigarettes online, that means that you have to pay the postage. And even if cigarettes are expensive, as in, and for example, in Ireland, with the example we used more often, still adding again some euros on that price for sending one carton by mail. I think that is economically not viable for those trading in illicit tobacco. They much more rely on the informal networks in bars where you can buy it under the counter, or well, maybe for someone in the street. So this additional costs is, I believe, a big hurdle to become to make illicit tobacco trade through the internet very successful. If we talk about distribution to the end customer.
yeah, but also take into consideration cost benefit, you know.
Yeah.
And especially if you're paying cryptocurrencies, you know, you definitely then, I mean, it's a great vehicle for avoiding paying taxes.
For large transactions, absolutely. There's no doubt that there's a criminal money flowing using cryptocurrency, avoiding taxes, etc. But for the distribution to the end consumer, I don't believe people are going to establish their Bitcoin account to buy cigarettes.
No, I agree. I mean, I would think that if it's going on online and in the dark web, I would think that there's a big, the large sizes, the large scale going on, and not the small one. I definitely would not go into dark web, and if I wanted to do bootlegging or whatever, you know, I wouldn't be ordering online. I would go somewhere, buy this additional pack, and that's it.
Yes, yes.
It's easier than to hide somewhere in the car. Yeah. Let me go back to a point that you mentioned, Livia. You know, the track and trace. Tracking and tracing regime that governments need to establish. One of the measures actually, and based on this protocol, and I ran across I mean, I read it, of course, that they have the time of 5 years in order countries, the countries that adopt this protocol, the parties to the protocol, they have 5 years. From your experience, any trade you can say actually, has this been successful in practice?
Well, searching on this topic, when I was reading, I found a very interesting thoughts about why the countries have concerns and why maybe this implementation was not so successful in all the countries which are ratified the protocol. And the concerns are real. So I would like to share it with you. First of all, what to do pending entry into force. Okay, so what to do until we are ratifying? Shall the measures that we are using as a country will be opposite of the measures we had to adopt since we are ratifying that protocol? Then also very important problem is that ratification and implementation of the protocol needs the involvement of multiple sectors, multiple ministries. So the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, maybe the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Interior Affairs. So, you know, it's a large work to take all these ministries, agencies to work together in just one issue. Then, you know, we in many countries we have a very strong tobacco industries. Those industries are very important for the economy of that country. So we have to be very careful when we speak with them, but not because we are afraid as a country, but to find mutual agreement how to work together. And then the tracing, tracking and tracing systems, the main question is how to implement pending decisions. And finally, I think the most important, maybe most important, is the cost for government of implementing these measures. So these are 5 things that every country, maybe not all 5, but some of them were maybe considered when the countries which signed the protocol were thinking about. So maybe there is maybe there is lying an answer why some countries didn't adopt at all, or it explains shall we look about in the countries which adopt everything, how they did it, and let us watch in some good practice and let us learn from them something. So I answered you negatively. So in the meaning, what causes the problem of implementing? The idea is very good, and I think the protocol is very good. But as you mentioned, the 5-year period is enough and not enough. It depends on the national framework. We are watching these requirements that every country has to implement in the national law.
Those are important points that you mentioned. You know, these issues when it comes to, you know, discussing the success of implementing the protocol. I wanted to come back to this later, but you already mentioned there was one, I mean, good example of a country that actually, I would say, has a strong tobacco industry, you know, but still very successful also in implementing protocol. It's UK. So this is something that I wanted to ask later on when we discuss some of good practices and what we can learn from them. On another point, tobacco industry, you know, we tend to have perception of tobacco industry as this evil, that we wouldn't have a problem, this problem, if it wasn't for them, you know. This definitely so, and the protocol discusses this, you know, addresses this importance of actually cooperation, interaction between the governments and tobacco industry, and it says that it should be carried out with maximum transparency. What exactly does this mean with maximum transparency? I mean, we actually discussed. You also mentioned that you were surprised. I mean, in a positive way. You know, in a positive way, surprised when you were, if I may say so, approached by one of the tobacco companies that actually helped you in detection and any other points that you were dealing with when there was a case of illicit tobacco trade in Serbia. Why do we still have, I mean, this negative perception, and why we're surprised? I mean, there should be, I mean, protocol envisages this cooperation, so why we still don't take this as an important measure? Well, did you run across some of the arguments why? I mean, of course, yeah, perception, as I mentioned, you know, we see them as evil, but is this so?
Well, you cannot, every time I'm thinking about the tobacco industry, I'm thinking about as a very successful industry with lots of incomes. And first question for me is, why would they help us? Because they are selling cigarettes, but of course that they have the will to help us because we are dealing with the illicit trade of tobacco, but we are, this is for me a new approach, and I think it's a good approach because in those industry they have informations that we don't have. But I also find some interesting things I wanted to share with you according to how the states are communicating with the tobacco industries. It has to be transparent, as you said, but in Montenegro, for example, the tobacco industry is prohibited by the law, of course, to financing any activities which are related to the protection of public health. So it cannot be made together. So tobacco industry cannot give money for any activity which is related to the protection of the public health. In Serbia, in 2005, Ministry of Health said no health care institution cannot accept the support from the tobacco industry. That's that. So no exception. In 2007, tobacco control activity, we had a Serbian tobacco control strategy, and there are also some steps and the ways how to communicate with the tobacco industry and what is forbidden, what not. But actually, I mostly like the Ukrainian approach, which they also have the rules how to communicate with the tobacco industry, what can they do, what they don't. But they spread activities on the civil societies, on NGOs. So they not just leave it on the level government and tobacco industry, but they spread those activities on the whole society, which I think is a very good approach.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. Yeah, we still have to pass this threshold. Thinking as, I mean, you're right when you said, who knows better industry than the ones who is, producing it, tobacco.
And they have, of course, they have an incentive because the illicit, if you look at it from economic terms, illicit trade is competition for them. So if you can join forces with governments to take out the competition, why wouldn't you?
I think there's a lot of activities that should be implemented, especially when it comes to this point of protocol, is raising awareness on precisely on this issue. We can think of them, that they're the one that cause, by producing, cigarettes and then making our health worse. But it is what it is. I mean, this industry has been existing for centuries, and yes. We definitely cannot beat it or anything, but to join forces, as you said, and at least what we can do is use their knowledge on fighting this illicit tobacco, because as we discussed, it's worse to have this illicit tobacco because we don't know what substances they use. It can be worse for our health. And you heard, I gave you the number of how many deaths we have per year due to illicit tobacco. So
I was a little bit trying to find, and I went on many tobacco companies' web sites, and the tobacco industry is really changing. I think in the past you couldn't find any information about the health and about the problems which tobacco is making, but now almost every tobacco company has the part. Of course, that is the last part of the web page, but you can find some very useful information, some very good information. So I think that the tobacco industry is changing. They are accepting, okay, this is our job. It hurts your health, but let us find something common between these two totally different things. So I think that, and I really think it's good. Somebody would say, oh, come on, what are they saying? So they are just want to sell cigarettes. They don't care about anything else. But I don't think it is now the issue. They are changing, they are modernizing, and they accepted that it's a problem, and they want to help.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's the same. We could argue for also for manufacturers of alcohol. It's the
Yes.
same thing, but you're right. I mean, they are changing, and one of the very interesting things that I saw with Philip Morris is the motto "smokeless."
Mm-hmm. Really?
Smokeless.
Now
That's
now I'm thinking, and what about the wineries and the fantastic wine industry? I didn't look at them, but now I would try to look at them and to find, do they have those health instructions about the alcohol is not good for our health? That would be an interesting to watch.
True. Okay, so let's also move to another point. I mean, we discussed some of it, but here's also a photo. It's always nice to see. So, do you know? I mean, what is the current status of protocol? Where we are now? I mean, yeah, we discussed there are some problems in some countries in ratification. There's also some problems in implementation, but in general, there's still large number of non-parties, as you can see. And what exactly is, I mean, what is required in order for a country to become a party to the protocol? Do you know?
So every country which is the part who signed and accepted the framework, so WHO, FCTC, can be the part of the party in the protocol. Then every member of the UN can be the member of the party of the protocol, and countries which are parties in several regional mutual cooperations. So it's very wide and it's very open to be the part of the protocol. I think it's very good and very important that they gave the opportunity for those who are not signed the protocol, I'm sorry, not signed the framework, but they think that the protocol, which is an expertise of the Article 15 of the framework, they could approach to this protocol, they could use it, they can be members. So I think it's the very good idea. The picture that we are seeing now is not very good. Many countries, more countries are not the members. The Europe situation is also not very well. I think it could be better. But so this is, as we said, at the three levels. Some of them adopted and they are working on the protocol. Some of them are half, so they signed it, ratified it, but struggle with adopting in the national framework. And some of them are not doing yet, and there is several reasons why not. But Sandra, for me, when we speak about these prevention and all of these measures, it has to be watched from the national point of view. Every country has his own problems. So a protocol gave us some standards, but as we mentioned, countries have individual cultural habits, maybe migrations, as we were speaking yesterday. Some of them have more other problems which are more important than this. So we have to be very careful when we are asking some countries, why didn't you do it? Maybe there are very important reasons why they didn't still applied the protocol in the national law.
That's true. Yeah, because I'm looking now in front of, I have notes here in front of myself, when it comes, And I'm looking what are the measures they need, 3 levels that they need to implement countries in order to become parties. And actually they focus quite a lot on a national level. One is international when they actually deposit the instruments of ratification, but then on a national level, it's very important because they have to first adopt and enact the national legislation, and implement administrative and of course institutional measures to implement, but then also, approve this in accession via in parliament or any other executive authority. And you're right, and you mentioned also before, it needs to be done on country to country basis, because there are different issues, and you mentioned them, maybe some there are strong tobacco industries, maybe, their income depends, GDP depends on this,
Yes.
so it needs to be actually tailor-made. So you're right. But why is then, why is protocol then so much important? Why we want to achieve all these countries to become parties? Is it because of what they call the knowledge hubs? What are actually the knowledge hubs? You guys know this?
Can
No.
I?
Elena?
Okay. Well, these knowledge hubs are, when we say hub, again, one modern word, it's until now there are established 8 knowledge hubs, at least one in every WHO region. And their task is to analyze, synthesize, and disseminate to the parties of convention knowledge and all information that matters under their expertise in relation to this convention. They speak about cooperation in scientific, technical, legal fields and provision of related expertise. That's why they are very, very important, because in the scope of their work, they share knowledge and what should be done in the future. So the first one that became operational was in Australia, and the recent one in 2020 in Brazil.
Do we know how many are those? How many?
Eight, yes.
Is there any closer to us in our region?
I haven't find the knowledge hub. No, I haven't find close to us. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a knowledge panel, so that's the point is, actually, if I understood correctly from what you said, is to share the knowledge on these matters and the expertise. What does that mean, to share the expertise? Do they have experts that is like a roster of experts that, if you face a problem that you can actually call, or how does it work? I'm really not acquainted with this, so.
Yes, just simple explanation is like our panel. We're all experts in some field, so we're sharing knowledge on the point, which is how to eliminate illicit tobacco trade. That's the way they are working. So those knowledge hubs that are, I found there is a knowledge hub on legal challenges, on surveillance, on smokeless tobacco, on water pipes, taxation, international cooperation, different ones on different topics.
I think it shows, Sandra, how important is this protocol really for WHO. They are really trying to specialize informations according to several topics, and they're really trying to help with their knowledge, expertise, databases. So they are focusing on very small problems in huge problem called illicit trade tobacco, and in these problems to give the best informations, to share the informations, to give experts who can help to understand, maybe to change, maybe to implement. So they're really focusing on the problem.
So would you say that this is one of the key benefits that countries can see beside the ones that actually are mentioned in the protocol is that increase the national security, increase the fiscal revenues, and most importantly, you protect the health of the population, and in particular vulnerable groups. Yeah, that wants to buy cheaper tobacco that is produced illegal or something like this. So, but on a practical level, would you say that this information sharing, these knowledge hubs are the ones that we could, let's say, use in order to sell countries why it's good that they ratify and actually implement these measures from the protocol? Not just being an abstract, I mean, it's not an abstract level, but there's a long-term effects, which is, we want to protect health, we want to have better fiscal revenues from it, from fighting the illicit trade, but the short-term effects of this protocol are, I believe, being more efficient in fighting this, and these are all these measures, I guess, that the protocol is stipulating.
I would summarize that the key benefit of a protocol is that you have one standard. Let's assume that every country in the world has the intention to protect the health of their citizens and to fight illicit tobacco trade. However, how are you going to do that? And if every country has their own system and their own approach, then it's not going to work. So that's why and it's not just this protocol. You have this type of agreements in many more areas. And the key benefit is usually that there is an agreed standard of information exchange, an agreed standard in this case of tracking and tracing, etc. And therefore we know what we expect when what we can expect when we cooperate with another country. We're all doing the things in the same way, and that's much more effective in the end.
Yeah, that's also a good point. But I cannot go without asking. I'll move to another. It's still a related topic, but I have to ask you this, for your opinion, because one of the arguments is actually when we adopt the protocol and everything, fighting illicit trade would generate higher, revenues, and because we would definitely tax more tobacco products, and one of the arguments is that we should strengthen and uphold our national tax policies. So where taxes are low, we should increase them to the level where taxes are in, let's say, the western part of Europe. This is how we should also bring it up in regions. Let's say from our region to increase it to the tax level of West EU. Do you think this would solve the problem, or do you think we would cause even more illegal production?
I think we would cause more illegal production in the countries which are not very wealthy, okay? And this will only put people in the situation to find cigarettes in the black market. So I think we really have to be very careful. We have to measure taxes according to the personal income of the population in that country. So as you said, nationally tailored to the specific country, and I think that in the richer countries it is a good measure, but in countries which are not in those economic position, these measures has to be very, very cautiously thought about what to do.
I absolutely agree with that. There's an interesting example, and if you look at Scandinavia and especially Sweden, when it comes to the trade in alcohol, where the alcohol is absolutely taxed at the highest level, more or less compared to the rest of the world. In Sweden, nearly everyone has or knows how to distill their own alcohol. So what you will, because it's too expensive. I think they have normalized it a bit, but especially a number of years ago, I had it in high school. I had a friend. He came from Sweden, and his father still had his distillation equipment with him, even in the Netherlands. So and what I'm afraid of, and especially in the region where there is well, tobacco can be grown on a small scale. If you make the taxes in Serbia, Montenegro, and the whole region higher, as high as in other parts of Europe, people will start to grow their own tobacco, and you will see much more illicit trade in maybe a smaller scale, not a large organized crime, or maybe they will go into that in local producing. And then you also will see the weakness of the protocol, and especially what I believe is the weakness of the tracking and tracing system that is focused on the legitimate industries. Legitimate industry will have to implement their tracking and tracing, but once tobacco doesn't enter that tracking and tracing chain, then you can do whatever you want. So the tracking and tracing will not be effective against illicit tobacco growing in the end.
And in the end, if you look at it, look where is this, demand comes from, from higher tax countries.
Yeah, also.
I think the very good measure, Sandra, is to raise the society's knowledge about how bad is smoking for our health, and to put it on all the levels of the society. Start with those education with the kids, because kids are surrounded with the parents or granddads, grandfathers, especially here in Serbia, which are smoking. So they accepted it from the very beginning, when they're very small, as okay to smoke when you are having fun. Okay, when I'm having fun, I will smoke. It's okay. And he or she is raising with that thought. And when she or he is 14, 15, 16, then they start smoking. They are in high school, they are starting to go out. Okay, so why not? I saw that that's okay for my parents. That's okay for my grandparents. Why shouldn't it be okay for me? Nobody told me that it's it's not good. So I think a better approach would be the health approach when we speak about the cigarettes.
I fully agree. Yeah. Okay, let's now move to some of the sections of the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products, and this is part of the methods for risk assessment. And of course, protocol has 10 sections. However, there are 3 actually sections that are really like sticking out from this protocol, and they are considered as a key methods of illicit trade prevention that we should focus. So, you see it on the slide, actually: supply chain, then establishment of the offenses, and international cooperation and reporting. We have been talking about this also, but let's look at the first one, the supply chain control. And the protocol says that the objective of this is to actually eliminate all forms. This is what you don't like, all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products in accordance with the terms of the WHO Framework Convention Tobacco Control. And they also say that the member country has to take the action to identify any key inputs that are essential to manufacture. And you were talking also about this, importance of on the side of manufacturing of products. What does that mean of the supply chain control? What are the key inputs that are essential regarding this measure? I mean, I'm sure that we already discussed at some point, but maybe for our listeners to also get the final touch of the supply chain control, what is meant.
Well, supply chain control includes that as we said, the track and trace control. But as Ludo mentioned, and it's a very good point, we with the protocol are monitoring the legal industry. But for me, most important is, again, today, Sandra, I am trying to answer you with the questions, but I think that these questions, on your question, I'm giving another question. These questions are important in this first. So in tracking and tracing. So what causes the illicit trade is when we find it, then we can change many things in the country. Is it so every country has his own problems? Do we have the cultural problem? Do we have the poor governments? Do we have the poor borders? Do we have the society which is not concerned about his health? So when we find answer on these questions, then we are doing something that I really don't like, I have to tell you. So lots of datas, analyzing those datas, making some sense from all kinds of informations, and understanding the problem. When we understand the problem, then we can make very good track and trace systems. Then we will know how to do licensing, how to check the distribution, how to check the individuals who are raising the tobacco. In the previous sessions, I told you the example of the producer who's in the beginning of the tobacco producing made a fraud. So we have to understand that in every phase of the tobacco production can be done some kind of fraud. Sometimes it's a small, sometimes it's a big, but as in every problem, you have to first understand what is the root of the problem. And then, sometimes when I was reading all these explanation analyses, we always speak only about the corruption, maybe the poor government, and these are classical. But sometimes there are some other very important reasons that we are not seeing. Through the woods, we are not seeing the one tree, or vice versa. So I think we should go out a little bit from the corruption, go out maybe a little bit from the poor or weak borders. There are many other problems which can help us to understand and then change thinking, and then change the rules. We have to focus on people. My opinion, we really have to focus on people. We really have to focus on population, and to educate population, to help to education, with the education, and to raise economy, and then many illegal activities will go down. That's my opinion.
And going back to tracking and tracing regime that we keep mentioning, and the next control to be implemented vis-a-vis this tracking and tracing regime is, what they call it in protocol is actually global information sharing point. And the deadline for implementation again is set at 5 years. What does this global information sharing focal point does? I mean, how does this work in practice if I wanted to use as a law enforcement? And what is TFZ management, trade free zone management. What is meant here?
I'm not very acquainted with the information of the TFZ. I don't know. Do Ludo or Milena maybe know better than me? But as far as I know, these zones are win-win combination for the industry in one side and the country on the other side. So the country benefits with the free trade zones in some industries, in some diverse fields of business which are coming in those zones, and of course the people who are using the free trade zones also have some easier workspace or easier taxes or easier procedures to work in some countries. So it's a mutual agreement which is good for both sides.
Yeah, the end, I think that TFZ management at the end it goes everything to with the aim of more controlling and having the equal when it comes to financial transactions and payments. I think this predominantly refers to, but I don't know, maybe Ludo, Milena can add more on this.
And in general, these free zones, which do have economic benefits for countries, but also that there is less control, government control in those free zones. And you see, especially in the smuggling, that a high use is made of free zones and free ports, where due to the lack of customs controls, for example, and because there's no very often there's no duties levied in those free zones, those are points where the traffickers can make containers disappear or appear and break the logistic chain, or at least break the paper trail for those logistic chains. And that's why these are important. If you look at it from illicit tobacco trade prevention, that you make sure that these on tobacco trade, that there is some control in these free zones. And of course that goes against, it could go against the interests of the local governments, because those free zones very often have a big economic benefit to the countries where they are established. So yeah, that's interests that basically are opposite of each other.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I heard in many times, discussions and, some other, panels or conferences, and also from, the industry itself, that one of the best measures when it comes to management of TFZ zones is actually that you prohibit, that tobacco products from being intermingled with non-tobacco products. But I think, again, the major concern is here, as you actually pointed out, is when it comes to, sales, that needs to be ensured that actually this international transit and transshipment should cover actually all this also duty-free sales. Yeah. It's important but going back again to internet sales, some of the arguments that I also hear that actually there should be, this is what I said, that should be considered to ban retail sales by internet. Do you think that this could be a good measure, just completely to prohibit retail sale by internet?
I'm not sure if that's actually possible. Also because we think of I mean, governments think of regulating the internet, but the internet is not something that you can as easy regulate as a physical space, where you have law enforcement walking around and being able to prevent or to detect illegal things. And the internet is well, has a different governance model. So I'm not so sure if that's actually possible.
I don't think it's a good idea, to be honest with you. I was thinking how we can apply track and trace system in the in the internet retail section, and I'm not sure how to do it. And is there any way to do it? But we live in that kind of world, that internet and virtual world is a very, it becomes a very important part of our everyday life, not just our private lives, but our business life. So we are now, all four of us are now using internet, and just as a joke, I was how important works. I was yesterday explaining to my mother, who was asking, okay, I understand that you, four of you, have the conversation, but how you are doing that, how you can see you, who is speaking, can you speak, four of you all together? So she is almost 80, and the internet is a big part of her life. So she's using Viber, she's using Facebook, she's a very modern grandma. And when somebody who is 80 using internet as a part of her life, if we compare it with the kids, 14, 15, yeah, maybe younger, they are now 50-50. I think half of their life is on internet and half of their life is real, as Ludo says. So we really have to consider that the businesses are going in that way. So half of them will be, maybe not yet, but maybe it will be. So now we, maybe not half of them, but lots of them are going on the internet. We are using the virtual world to work each other. So good topic to think about it.
Okay, so and then the next step that actually is envisaged, stopping the illicit tobacco trade is seizure of payments. So how important is actually the seizure of payments?
I'm sorry, it was cutting. I don't know, is it my internet or something is the problem?
So let me repeat. So the next step in stopping, according to protocol, is actually in illicit tobacco trade is seizure of payments. So how important is this seizure of payments?
Very important. I think this is the most effective way to show the strength and the will of the governments to fight against illicit trades. But it's a very fragile field, so the rules which are dealing with this problem have to be very, very strict. We have to know who will deal with it, who has the power to do this, in which situations we can do the seizure of payments. Is there a right for appeal? And finally, maybe the first thing I should say, when we finish the process of seizing payments, is it permanent, or is it only for all temporary, and who will get the money on the end? So that is also the important question. Will that money go to the government, or in some other agencies, in which government agencies? Very important questions, but very, very, it has to be organized with the very strict rules, because sometimes the seizures are long, big, huge amounts of money. So track and trace system should be also applied here.
Yeah, I think this is a very important area, because if we take example from Bosnia, where unfortunately rule of law, I mean, there have been improvements, but, you know, I think it's fair to say that the rule of law has not been in many cases as effective as it should have been done. Yeah. And when I talk about the illicit tobacco trade, talk about this, I'm sure there are some other areas, but let's focusing now on this one as an example. And this was because of the fact that, you know, the difficulties that confiscated assets actually in the cases when the ownership has been transmitted, you know, to usually what happens to a family member or even some trusted individual who is not necessarily the family member. And in order, of course, to avoid the prosecution and even investigations, but this is something that you mentioned. To whom does then this, you know, these assets belong? You know, who gets the money after, and what do we do? I mean, one of the recommendations is actually that all these confiscated tobacco products, manufacturing equipment should be actually destroyed. You know, and protocol also envisages environmentally friendly methods to the greatest extent possible. Is this done in practice? I mean, do we go when we completely destroy? You mentioned, you know, in Serbia there are many. I mean, not many, but there are fabrics who produce illicit tobacco. You know, but not just Serbia, but we've seen, you know, where is the actually the supply countries, you know, which are the supply countries. I mean, have we seen cases where they went actually in and burned down the fabric?
We have the agency which is dealing with the seizures after the criminal charges, and it works very well because they work with the judges and with the prosecutors. So the rules are very strict, and it's a government agency. That's the most important things to say. So everything that we seizure goes to that agency, and it is recorded, and in any moment we know where it is and how many of these products we seizured, or if it's a money, then we know where that money goes. So that's why I said to you, the rules has to be very strict. But here is an example of a very tricky question. So what when we have the firm which is in Serbia, but it has the bank, the account in several banks in Hungary, and some houses, buildings in Romania, and the fraudulent activity is in Hungary, but the company is a Serbian company. Now, what to do when we finish? What we will do with the lots of money on in those bank accounts, because they are in the Hungary? And what shall we do with the houses and fields and any other things that that company owns in the Romania? Now, here is a huge problem, and it's not easy to resolve, because every country wants to be the part in this topic. So everybody wants their seizures.
And how is this done? I mean, it's a problem, but how is then practically done? How is solved? Are there
I don't know yet. But we do had a very big problem in some international case. It is not connected with the tobacco, but it could be a tobacco industry. It is something totally different. But the question is about seizure, because every of these countries said, okay, Serbia says yes, this is a company which is a basically Serbian company. Hungarian said, colleagues from Hungary said, okay, but the money is in the bank. Romanian colleagues said, okay, just a moment. The illegal houses and fields are in the Romania. We don't have, or I don't know yet the result.
It's not that difficult,
okay.
Because I think that we should. I think you should go back to the beginning and also this question: how important is that any criminal benefits are being seized, well, that's very important, because you don't want them to, criminality should not be a rewarding activity in the end. So, and we should not conflate that with troubles when we actually try, legal troubles when we try to seize. Of course, there will be some questions there, but the first step is, do we agree that it is important that any criminal benefits will be taken away from the criminals? I think the answer should be yes. And then you go to the practical part, and of course, every country will say, yeah, but I want to seize I want to keep anything that is being seized on our territory. And I don't see the problem with that, because in the end, even if you, in your case, you look at it from a Serbian perspective, if all the funds are in a bank in Hungary and the Hungarian authorities says, yeah, okay, we can seize them and the criminal will lose them, but we don't share them with Serbia. Well, that's too bad for that moment, but in any case, the criminal cannot have any access to the funds anymore. So, and that's more, in the end, on the long term, that's more important, I believe, rather than who gets the actual funds. And I do realize that there are bureaucratic processes and there is pressure from bureaucratic institutions that that the funds should be coming back to the country where the investigation was done. I understand that, but if we all take a step back and we look at the long-term perspective, I believe this is not really the most important question. The most important question is that the criminals lose their benefits. But that's a personal opinion, I should say.
I agree with you. I agree. And Sandra, may I ask something, Milena, because she's dealing with the EU funds, because this particular case was connected with the EU funds. Now, is that track and trace system, can we found it in the EU funds? Is those who are giving the money always know where is the money and how it's used, and how strict are those rules from the perspective of EU funds?
It is multi-level controls are prescribed, and also auditing to provide assurance. So it is based on integrated international framework for internal controls. So every euro that comes from funds in our country, we must provide assurance that it is spent in accordance with agreement or purpose for which it should be used. So when we make parallel in controlling system, we started today with the WHO protocol. It is a golden standard here, and also in EU funds we have strictly prescribed standards and policies and procedures, which all participants are obliged to act in compliance with it. If we get knowledge that some funds are not spent in accordance with agreement, then obligatory of our country, of Serbia, is that we pay it from our budget. So that's why it is a good countermeasure that in our country we also should provide a good control system, because at the end it's our budget will pay for it.
Since one of the aims of the protocol is the international cooperation, so I'm sorry, Sandra, now I'm taking you as a moderator. So is this cooperation with the EU funds, according to your experience, good? But in both sides. So is it fluent in the both directions?
Yes, cross-border cooperation is working very good in borders of our country, we have a very good cooperation, and information flows very quickly, very fast. And in the end, we cooperate also with Olaf if some irregularities are taken part in whole process. So I can say that this is very good. Internal control systems are imposed in this system, so it can be also used in our topic in this area, to provide preventive controls, to know all the measures that, as Ludo said, it is good to have the same standard in all parties of protocol, and at the end to cooperate with each other. So without this cooperation, previous two steps are senseless. So that is the key: prevention, the same standard, same law enforcement, and in the end, cooperation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this, also I think it relates to the data, from this cooperation that we gather, because I think this is really important that we mention, in order to be effective, we need to have as much as possible information. And this also goes to the next, actually, discussion points that I wanted to touch with you, is the strategic steps, the analysis and the recommendations. We discussed extensively, to understanding the way the illicit tobacco traffic is operating, and combining this data is essential to limit this industry, not to eliminate. I agree with you, Olivia. We cannot eliminate everything to the zero ground, but at least we can limit this industry. And so far, what we have been discussing is that the illicit tobacco takes many different forms, variety and severity, different levels of severity in countries. And we have smuggling across borders, we have declaring exports, products for the export, and then we have undeclared production, then we have using free zones, selling tobacco product via internet, phone, mail. I mean, as we can see, there are many issues here. And we're discussing the importance of preventing this illicit tobacco trade. But, and the data sharing information is crucial. And how is this done in practice? I mean, we heard a good example, on cross-border cooperation, that Milena was mentioning. But when it comes to illicit tobacco and then the steps that we need to take, how is this done in practice? How can we, you mentioned, Livia, that what you're lacking is more information, more data. How do we go about strengthening this data, this analysis, the planning? How do we go about this? Well, what would you like to see more?
Yes. So first of all, I have to tell you that I'm not good in analyzing and collecting data. This is not my favorite job. I love to use them, of course, in my job. What we need in our work as the prosecutors is a very good database. So informations which we can use in our works. But the information as an information is not enough, Sandra. I need an expert in that field who can explain me what is what. Working as a prosecutor doesn't mean that we know everything. So we are dealing with the medical problems, with the stealings, with the tobacco, with the drugs, with all kinds of crimes, but we cannot be, we don't have knowledge about everything. So, or specialize some prosecutors in that field, or using specialists from that field who can help us to understand what are those datas mean. And for us in Serbia, the most important are regional data. So how it goes, how it flows in our region, and the growing education, how to use those informations, who is doing what. We were talking about it in previous sessions. For me, is a very important strategic step according to my work. But according to me as a person, I think the very important thing is there is a word, the phrase, change expectations. So it is also very important to change expectation in these fields, and to be real, and to understand that we have to start with the small steps. If we don't do nothing, nothing will change. Sometimes small steps, we don't see the result of those small steps, but one small step will probably not change, but 10 small steps will do the change. And we just have to move forward. We have to work, and we have to find a way how to work. So raising the knowledge, specializing in that field are strategic steps according to my job. And when I'm saying this, Sandra, I mean everybody who works with us as a prosecutors. I'm speaking about the police officers, I'm speaking about the border officers, I'm speaking about judges, specialists from the ministries. So we really need specialize and to have that know-how, techniques to use.
And just curious now, what are your thoughts when they say that we should decrease the? For me, this is a little bit contradictory. Let me just start like this, because at some point we say we should, transparently cooperate with the tobacco industry. Then on the other side, we have one of these recommendations that we should decrease the reliance on tobacco industry. Where do experts come from? Tobacco industry. I mean,
yes.
not when it comes to, let's say, investigative methods or something, but the industry knowledge, the substance, and everything. I mean, who knows better? But then it says, decrease the reliance on them, but then build political coalitions against illicit tobacco.
But it looks like contradictory, and maybe in some topics it is contradictory. But if I have somebody from the tobacco industry who is a really expert in raising tobacco or in equipment which is used in tobacco industry, he can help me when I have some information. So something is happening somewhere, or what about this topic? He can help me with his knowledge, because he's helping me in some totally different topic, not rising the tobacco industry, but helping me to deal the criminal charge. So the perspective of view is totally different. So I'm using his knowledge for my job, and I think I can use it very well. His employer will use the knowledge of that expert in raising some, I don't know, incomes or maybe some other part in that industry. So the point of view and using the knowledge is totally different. Although you're right, Sandra, it looks a little bit contradictory. We are trying to forbid, and on the other hand, please help us.
Precisely.
So isn't it so that the recommendation is to decrease the reliance on? So it doesn't say anything about. I mean, the tobacco industry can still be part of this coalition against illicit tobacco trade, but you just don't rely on them necessarily. They're one of many equal partners.
Yeah, interesting points. It's not black and white. Yeah? It's always something. You Have to be practical when it comes to this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But practical, Sandra, sometimes goes in maybe not a proper way to do some things. Yes, and in my job, this is almost every day that we get some informations, but we don't get those informations on the way which our law is allowing, and then or I don't know what to do with that information, or I have to find a way to properly use that information. So practical is very good, but in my job sometimes makes things harder.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, another recommendation, when it comes to, better prevention of illicit tobacco trade, is actually the overall tobacco control. And they mentioned this. You have it on slide. Also, the key elements. Go big, go fast. What this actually means. Go big, go fast. And then attack affordability. I mean, I ran across, when they talk about go big, go fast, they actually go for a big tobacco excise tax rate and increasing starting early in the process. We discussed a little bit about the tax, and then when it comes to attacking affordability, they says that we should actually, if we reduce the tobacco affordability, then we can also reduce the tobacco consumption, and then expectations. That you mentioned this, the communication with the people, with the public is actually crucial, and
Yes.
Government's role is also very important when it comes to explaining the health consequences and so on. And tax by quantity, we also discussed a little about this, and one of the arguments that we are actually that we shouldn't be on the same rate, and what they say actually here is that we shouldn't tax by the price, but the quantity of cigarettes that should be taxed, and then of course regional collaboration and countering the pressure. Lobbying when it comes to tax rate increases and so on. At the end, we see everything that increasing the taxes, and then this would decrease the consumption because it will be expensive. Do you think, again, just to sum up what we already discussed before, is this efficient and enough for tobacco control and therefore preventing the illicit tobacco? Yes or no? What do you guys think? I mean, this is one of the recommendations. I'm just putting out to you, getting from the practical point of view, the perspective.
As we said, Sandra, in some points it's a good recommendation, and in some points not. You have to be very cautious, and you have to measure it with the national framework. And if you do it, then do it in national framework. So if some taxes are very high in, let's say, northern part of the Europe, and they having, so the feedback is good, it doesn't include that the same measure in, let's say, less fortunate countries would take the same effect. On contrary, it could be something that will rise the illicit trade.
Ludo, Milena, you have any comments when it comes to this?
I think the same, that raising taxes is an unpopular measure, especially in our region. And I think that it would, just as Livia said, it would increase illegal tobacco trade for sure. There is no need for risk assessment for this measure. We can say for sure that it will be the fact that it will raise illegal tobacco trade.
Yeah.
And I think Ireland can serve as a example here again. One of the most highest taxed tobacco they have in Ireland, and you see that the smuggling towards Ireland is only increasing. And at the same time, what you also have to take into account that in Ireland it's too cold to cultivate tobacco, but in the region, in the eastern Southeast Europe region, tobacco can be very well cultivated on a small scale. So if you're going to raise taxes beyond what is reasonable compared to the average income, that's only going to blow back in a terrible way.
And Sandra, you know, I think Milena will understand this perfectly. In our country, there is a saying, so if somebody don't want to quit the smoking or drinking, the people usually say, so what I have left from life, only drinking and smoking is something that I can really do without any permission. And yes, and so this is, you know, again, some cultural approach to this problem, and people really think what they say. So they really think, so what I have left, please let me smoke, please let me drink. That's the only thing I really can do, and I don't want permission from anybody to do that. And I will find the cigarettes in illegals if they were very expensive. I will find an alcohol illegally if it's very expensive. So we have to be cautious.
Yeah, I mean, I understand perfectly what you're saying, because we have a similar, similar saying, but, you know, a little bit from a different perspective, when it says, you know, well, I have to die from something.
Yes, of course. That's that. Yes. That's the same thought in another way.
Have to die, you know. Everyone, you know, some people, you know, doing bungee jumping or whatever, you know, I'm smoking or I'm drinking heavy, you know, heavy drinker of alcohol. So yeah, I have to die from something. So, and one of the last recommendations that I want to point out, what they say is actually education. Encouragement of education and learning is a key factor to illicit tobacco fight, but I would say prevention, on the prevention side. You guys agree that this is, do you think, or do you disagree that this is the most beneficial measure or prevention step? I mean, hearing all this, you know, tobacco control here and there is, you know, seizing is vital, but, you know, not as one of the best prevention methods, because at the end, you know, this is not truly prevention, it's more of a detection, and then, you know, this is already what happened, and then we try and solve. But preventing not to happen something, I would say, I mean, my opinion is that education, training this, not on just what methods to use in order to investigate or, you know, to seize, but how bad this is, you know. And again, I cannot, this is why I started with the statistics, because at the end, I really think that even though we say, you know, I need to die from something, you know, still 6 million deaths because of the illicit. It's not that we're not discussing prevention in terms of stop smoking.
Yes.
Stop smoking illicit tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is the key thing?
Yeah, prevention education on different levels. I think Livia already mentioned youth, that you have to focus on the youth. In general, smoking is dangerous, and yes, of course you have to die of something, but it also matters the way you're dying. That really does matter. Smoking in general, smoking of illicit rubbish, more in particular, especially the dangers, and also the education of law enforcement or other authority employees on how to detect illicit tobacco production and trading, etc. So yeah, education is it's a bit of an open door, but it is what it is.
I think it should be a national strategy, and it should be put on all the levels of our lives, in every aspect of our life. And if you really want to have the result, the strategy and the action has to be very direct and has to be shown. So we are people who, especially young ones, don't love to read a lot. They want quick and very effective information. So if you put a very effective picture, if you put a very effective few words on that picture, if you put it all around in the schools, on the buses, on the trains, on the panels in the city centers, effective picture with the effective words, maybe not all of us, but maybe somebody will think, okay, let me think about it. So this is the information, I have to think about it. So it has to be the part of national strategy, and the action has to be very, very aggressive, I have to say, but positively aggressive. And I'm saying aggressive, so it has to be all around us in transport, in the schools, in our works, you know, and it has to be effective, very.
So if I understand correctly, so as a part of the national strategy, and you mentioned also youth. So if I'm thinking how I would, if I was a policymaker or whoever wanted to do, so I would organize then most likely a huge invest, you know, quite some money in this public awareness campaign, but I would involve young people, you know, at the end, you know, we try to influence, you know, the behavior and everything while they're still young, you know.
Yes.
And them have as a focus group on the, you know, of raising awareness and training and educating.
And we have to be modern. Yes. We have to be modern, Sandra. We have to use the Instagram. We have to use the Facebook. We have to use the concert. So any platforms which our kids are using, and
TikTok.
yes, TikTok. Yes, TikTok. Very super idea. So why not? So we really have to act proactively, and we have to target the group we want to approach and find the best way to approach them and to give them the information. Why not some concert with a very popular group, and so something that will keep their mind if our focus group are kids, youngs.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, let's now just in the last minutes that we have, you know, maybe because we have listeners from the region, from various countries in the region, I just thought it would be a good idea, so they're acquainted, if they're still, if they're not, like I said, you know, there are some of our listeners who just started dealing with these issues. Just to give a brief overview of the situation in the region when it comes also to protocol and the cooperation. And if you allow me, what I will do, I will just go through slides showing the example of countries, and then when I finish all of them, well, I mean, there are not that many in the region, but when I finish, then perhaps you can comment maybe on what you heard and what you think should be strengthened, and what are maybe the underlying problems that should be addressed in the near future. So if I look now first in Albania, you know, so Albania ratified protocol in 2006 to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products, and then also this they enforce the global track and trace system, and this is already imposed then in Albania. I'm just giving out to you, you know, the key issues when it comes to this protocol and fighting illicit tobacco in these countries. So then if you look at Bosnia, it's party to FCTC and the WHO protocol, but the protocol has not been fully implemented. And here I'm really being generous in stating that not being fully implemented. Then, you know, we have oh my God, Bulgaria, I'm already tired, who also adopted the FCTC, but failed to approach the protocol. and still lacks to impose harder control over the supply chain, and especially regulation of the key inputs that we discussed. Yeah. Then if you look at Croatia, I signed the WHO FCTC treaty in 2004 and then ratified it in 2008. But the protocol has not been implemented, and we've seen in one of other discussions, webinar discussions, is that quite some numbers of illicit tobacco is going through Croatia. I'm not saying the destination country, but you know, it's a quite an important transit country, Croatia. And then we also have Kosovo is not a signing member of WHO FCTC treaty. Maybe it's new to this process, but I think maybe there's some other reasons for not really being even a signatory member. Then we also have Montenegro. Their efforts in order to complete the WHO protocol ratification, whatever this means, the efforts. North Macedonia needs to increase efforts on tobacco control. You know, we talked about what is meant by tobacco control with ratification, implementation of the protocol, and then it has inadequate controls in these free trade zones. So this is something that we also discussed, you know, how should we deal with these FTZs. And then we also have Serbia. Serbia ratified a protocol, and the improvements are still to be made since smoking is allowed in bars and restaurants. We discussed this, I think, in this one of the first ones, one of the rare ones that actually does not have the regulation that bans the smoking inside. And then we have Slovenia, my country, you know, who signed the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. It was in 2014, and the track and trace system is in place, and it's also currently up and running also throughout this year. So I would say, and I'm not being subjective, but I believe in the region, Slovenia is one of the most, I'm not saying completely efficient, but it's, I believe, one of the most efficient countries when it comes to fight against illicit tobacco and the overall awareness of what it means when you smoke and how bad this is for health. So do you guys have any comments on this? Why we have these different issues? What is the underlying cause for this? You know, why in Slovenia we already have ratified and also in Croatia, but then why they're considering or not even approaching in some other countries in the region? I mean, don't we promote so much this international cooperation, education? What is the bottom problem for being such a different level? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I think first of all is development of the country, economic and social status.
Milena, sorry, keep this thought. I forgot, so I don't want this to be politically incorrect when we talk about extended Balkan route. I forgot Romania. Yeah, Romania. I just forgot it because I brag so much about Slovenia, so I forgot Romania. But the ratification of the WHO FCTC was made already in 2006. But protocol was never signed. So please, Milena, now go back.
Why is this map like in mirror? I see it.
I turned it around.
No,
it's another perspective that we need to look at.
Maybe
I didn't even notice this when I was putting up. So interesting.
Maybe problem with protocol is because of this open mirror picture.
Sorry for
we started. Yes, we started from Slovenia. I think that standard. Let's say that through analyzing this document, that we had Slovenian people are aware of awareness in Slovenia is on a high level. that is one fact which we cannot have as a parallel in Bosnia or in Serbia. So this raising of awareness between people, and we said a few minutes ago, between young people, should be the first step. Then discrepancies, I said, between countries in development, then EU member states, Croatia, Slovenia, Romania, Bulgaria, we are not comparable. When I say we, I mean the non-EU members from Balkan route. So these are some differences why some countries made the step forward and why some of us are still being in progress and not fully implemented, or what else we wrote. So
here I have a small disagreement, just a small disagreement. I don't think the key is that being part of EU, because I really think if you look at the where's the destination country, just looking from the Balkan route, but then again look at where the origins. Bulgaria is a part of EU.
Mm-hmm.
So just a small disagreement here, but I do think that influences a lot of development. Is this the only thing? I mean, is it more that younger people are aware? Is this the reason? I mean, or the structures that of people that are within the government who need to adopt this, agree on this? Do we have younger people in the government who they understand this? And then these are issues I would say that we need to take into consideration to be able to understand what are the underlying reasons for this difference.
I have to agree with Milena, because I think that the public awareness in as Milena said, and as you said, Sandra, in Slovenia is higher than in Serbia. And the key point in Serbia is, since the law, I have to read it, I'm sorry, it's too long. So law on the protection of the population from exposure to tobacco smoke. So it's the law since 2010, but it's the law which allowed smoking in the bars, and in the restaurants, in open spaces. So the first step should be to ban smoking in restaurants, in the bars, to really not to put people in the situations that they are really so mad that they are not allowed to smoke, that they decide, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. And not just with this measure, banning, but bombing people with the information, how bad is this for the health, how bad is this for their kids, how bad is this for environment. So lots of approaches, lots of measures working together simply to rise the awareness. With the rising of awareness, people will partly stop consuming cigarettes, and that is maybe the road of stopping, not totally, but stopping the illicit trade of tobacco. If I don't want to smoke, then I will not buy a cigarette, not legally, not illegally. So I will not do that.
No, I agree with Milena, definitely, and with you, raising awareness is the point what I wanted to make. I don't think it's really whether you're part of EU or not. It's what you do on national level, to raise awareness.
Yes. We talk a lot about the national tailoring and the national framework, and it's very important.
Ludo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I believe. If we look at the differences between implementation, ratification, etc., that it's. I believe, for example, Ireland also has not signed the protocol yet, or at least not ratified it yet. So it's very much depends on actual political situations in the different countries. I don't think even in a region there can be huge differences. So it's not only in Southeast Europe where you see these differences. You see it also in other parts of Europe where there are just differences in ratification, because it's so many factors which come into play.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end, I really think the key thing is, raising awareness. Raising awareness, and then, I think it's cooperating with tobacco industry, legitimate tobacco industry, and then of course, even though how unpopular might sound, but raising coalition with the governments, it's important, because at the end, they're the tone at the top.
Yes, and international cooperation is also very important, and the flow of informations also. So these are also very important things.
Yeah, and we now talked a little bit more about, Ludo, you mentioned as Ireland as an example, which we shouldn't really look at it as a positive, example of ratifying the protocol, but we mentioned, and this is going back to one of the first points when we talked about in this discussion, is UK, because UK has been successful, very successful in fighting the illicit trade. Brazil as well, but let's take UK as one of the examples, and their strategy. Look at, I listed it here on the slide, increasing criminal intelligence and investigation resources, introducing new technology, intelligence detection capability, and then pursuing procedures of crime and applying new powers of assessment and penalties, and of course, reducing the minimum indicative levels for personal imports. These were like key aspects in their national strategy in order to fight illicit trade, and they were very successful. And if we want to apply this success in our region, is this enough? Would this work if we use this, or is our region a little bit different, and then we should take other steps, other measures, other parts of the strategy to include in order to be effective? Again, I talked quite a lot that we shouldn't just copy paste, but look at case by case and country by country. But what are your thoughts? Should we combine these strategies that they used with particularities of our countries and strategies? You mentioned quite a lot. Let's use again Serbia example.
I think
banning smoking inside could be also very good strategy and part of the strategy. So what do you guys think? How could we take the good examples and apply it to
today we spoke about the prevention. I work on the other side. I work in repression, and I like these measures that we can see on the screen, especially the last one. So pursuing proceeds of crime and applying new powers of assessment and penalties. And it should be publicly shown what are the penalties, what are the fines. This is also, it is a repressive approach, but it has preventive ground. Okay, so if you see that somebody is penalized because of these type of crimes, smuggling or any other crimes which can be connected with the illicit tobacco trade, we didn't speak about those things as a tax. So the criminal charges about the taxes and not just smuggling, then the counterfeiting documents. So lots of criminal charges are included in these problems. And if you publicly show that somebody is penalized with a high fine, that's a very good approach. Why not? So I like these measures. I'm not sure that we can apply every of these measures, but some of them, yes.
It's always good to look at best practices and what these strategies show, and that they're working. As an example, they're absolutely perfect. And if you but you have to adapt them to the local situation. That's something we have to take into account.
They
You
must
can't
be
just copy paste.
they must be cost effective. So I'm not sure which, for the second one, introducing new technology, intelligence and detection capability, we should develop our national model. Of course, good practice is always not the best practice for our countries. So
Bottom line, take into consideration what is out there,
yes,
you know, and trying to tailor-made it as in any other issue, any other area as well. Good.
yes.
Okay, and just to wrap up, you know, as we always like to end our discussion series, you know, with the on the positive or negative note, but you know, what is your recommendation when it comes to, you know, prevention detection methods in a word or so, in one sentence? What would you say? And
Rising awareness and
Education.
Yes.
Yeah.
Milena, what did you call this word? Bench watching?
Band watching.
And then we see
Binge watching.
for the effects of all this.
I'm trying to find the adequate word, and I think that I have one. Influence. Let's be influencers. If we have the target group who are young people, and if they are almost whole day on their networks and applications, and we mentioned some of them, so we need to be influencers to have impact on them in raising awareness and education. So
Influencers, but the good influencers.
yes, good ones. Now, what did you mean if we are not the good ones?
Now, Sandra, you forgot a very important thing that we didn't mention today, and that we all agreed that we have a business idea, a new business idea, a new fragrance of the cakes, don't forget. So this is also came up from our conversations. So maybe 4 of us can think about it and maybe start a new business.
Yeah,
legal one.
New flavor on the market, vanilla cupcake, illicit tobacco. Thank you very much, guys, also for this wonderful and very important discussion on the topic, how we should deal with the prevention detection methods, and let's educate ourselves how to be more effective. Thank you very much. And I wish you all, also to listeners, thank you for being with us, and listen to our other webinar discussion series. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay.